My name is Samantha. I'm 38 years old and live in Austin, Texas, a city lively enough to hide the loneliness of daughters who always have to be strong simply because there's no other choice. I'm a financial advisor. My clients call me the one who steadies the ship in a storm, but within my own family, I'm just the responsible older sister, the one always expected to give way to my reckless younger brother, Tyler. If I had a dime for every time my mother said, "He's just confused, you have to understand him," I could have retired at 30. From an early age, our roles in the family were assigned without audition. I was the serious, quiet eldest daughter who made the adults proud. Tyler, 3 years younger, was the boy with teary eyes and a disarming smile, forgiven no matter how much trouble he caused. He once burned down the garage playing with a lighter, stole the class fund, dropped out of college halfway, yet was always excused with, "He's just trying to find himself." And me? When I earned a full scholarship, my dad just nodded. "Well, that's expected." When I worked part-time to pay off student loans, my mom only said, "You're strong, a little struggle won't kill you." It was as if every good thing I did was just my duty, while every mistake Tyler made was a forgivable accident. I still remember the night Tyler called me in tears, confessing he was nearly $30,000 in debt from online sports betting. I remember my mom's heavy sigh when I said I couldn't lend him money. "You work in finance? Can't you help him just a little?" she said, her voice cracking as if I were heartless for letting my brother drown. And Tyler? He coolly texted me his bank account info without even a thank you. Caught in that cycle of emotional exhaustion, the only person who ever truly saw me, listened to me, and believed in me was my grandmother, Margaret. That tiny woman once ran a furniture manufacturing company solo for 20 years after her husband passed. No one expected a 50-year-old widow to revive the family business, especially in a time when ambitious women were still considered too much. But she did, and she did it well. Grandma Margaret didn't speak often, but when she did, her words stuck. I'll never forget the summer I was 15 when I skipped camp to help her audit some ledgers. She didn't smile or praise me. She simply said, "You've got the mind for big things. More importantly, you're not afraid of responsibility. That's what the world needs." From then on, I spent every summer at her workshop. While my parents and Tyler went on vacations, baseball games, and family reunions, I sat in Grandma's dusty old office learning how to read balance sheets, how to ask the right questions, and how to hold my ground even when others called it stubbornness. She taught me that financial independence is the first, and maybe only, kind of freedom a woman should fiercely protect. When I turned 18, she gave me a gift I've never forgotten, an investment account in my name, seated with exactly $3,500. I had helped her tally that summer. "You earned it, so you'll know how to grow it," she said. And I did. I used it to launch my journey, earning a degree in finance, then an MBA, and later my investment advisor certification. While Tyler bounced from one community college to another and burned through cash on startup ideas without even a business plan, I worked my way up to partner at the third largest financial consulting firm in Austin. But success isn't a thick enough shield to protect you from the knives that come from behind, especially when those knives are held by the ones you love. I don't know exactly when my parents started seeing me as an ATM. Maybe it was when I bought my first house or when I finished paying off my student loans. But I knew that vision had solidified into an ugly truth the day I received the news of Grandma Margaret's passing, and that her entire estate was about to fall into the very hands she once warned me never to trust. Margaret passed away on a March morning, when late-season snow still dusted the edges of the roads. I was in San Antonio giving a talk at an investment conference when my phone buzzed. The voice on the other end, her attending doctor, softened the moment. I confirmed who I was. She passed at 6:13 a.m. in her sleep, no pain. I froze in the corridor of a five-star hotel, as if someone had just punched me in the chest. I returned to Austin in silence. The red brick house where she'd lived alone for nearly 30 years felt colder than ever. The old photo frame still sat neatly on the fireplace mantel. Me in my graduation gown, her arm around my shoulder, her smile tilted like she already knew I'd go farther than she ever dared to dream. The funeral was simple, with only around 20 close friends and family. Tyler showed up nearly an hour late, blaming traffic, wearing a brand new leather jacket. My parents, Carl and Linda, sat in the front row, trying to appear sorrowful, though my mother kept glancing at the family lawyer. The will reading was held 4 days later in her third-floor office on Congress Avenue. The lawyer, Raymond Knox, a longtime friend of Margaret's, was bald, wore a turtleneck, and had a calm but razor-sharp presence. Once we were seated, he said gently, "This will was last updated 6 months before Margaret passed. She instructed me to ensure every word remained exactly as she wrote it." My father nodded. My mother gave a tight smile. Tyler yawned. And then Raymond began. "Margaret left me, and only me, the core of her estate, the historic house near Lake Travis, the family heirloom jewelry collection, and an investment portfolio with a market value close to $2.1 million. That inheritance came with 3 conditions. The house could never be sold and must be preserved as a family landmark. The investment portfolio was to fund a nonprofit scholarship in her name, and the jewelry was mine to keep, as she wrote, to remember that the women in this family have never bowed. Tyler received a trust of $25,000, restricted for educational use or to start a legally registered business. The trustee in charge? Me. My parents were left a 2008 Cadillac, one Margaret hadn't driven in 4 years, along with a few antique ceramic pieces and a set of philosophy books she read in her youth. No one in the room said a word. I didn't smile, but I felt my heart pound with a steady rhythm, as if she had placed her hand on my shoulder from somewhere beyond, whispering, "You did it." My mother was the first to break the silence. "There must be some mistake. Margaret would never abandon her son like this." Raymond didn't respond. He simply flipped to the next page. She wrote clearly, "Carl and Linda are people I love, but I do not trust them to preserve what I've built. I have seen them indulge their son to the point of destroying him." Tyler's face turned crimson. "What? That old woman couldn't—" Raymond read on, never looking up. "As for Tyler, if he truly wants to change, he'll need to learn how to work with responsibility and understand that no one is obligated to pay for his laziness." My father looked like he wanted to speak but held back. My mother stood abruptly, grabbing Raymond's sleeve. "You can't let one daughter take everything like this. This will be contested." Raymond gently removed her hand. "This is a legally binding will, signed by 3 witnesses and notarized. You're absolutely free to hire counsel to contest it. But I advise you to think carefully, because I also have a voice recording of Margaret explaining every single decision in her own words." I hadn't spoken a word through the entire reading, but now every eye turned to me, not with sympathy, but the desperate glint of people watching a prize slip from their hands. I looked directly at my mother and said calmly, "She already knew, and she believed I'd protect what mattered most to her." Tyler mumbled something under his breath. My mother collapsed back into her seat, breathing hard. My father said nothing, but his eyes shifted, calculating. Raymond closed the folder. "That concludes today's session. Further details will be distributed to relevant parties. And remember, what matters isn't what she left behind, but why she chose to leave it that way." I walked out of that office with a strange clarity. Not joy, not grief, just certainty. I hadn't just inherited assets, I had inherited a battle, and the people I called family weren't done with me yet. The message from my mother came in on a Monday afternoon, just as I was in a 19th floor conference room, about to present a portfolio reallocation strategy to a major client. "Our family needs to meet urgently this weekend. 3 p.m. at home. No excuses." No explanation, no warm greeting, just a command. I looked up from my screen, that familiar sting rising in my chest like acid. the kind of invitation everyone knows is really a tribunal disguised as family. I forwarded the text to Olivia, my closest friend since college and now my colleague. She replied with just one sentence. Looks like it's your turn again. I hadn't told anyone, but ever since the will reading, I'd noticed a few odd things. Margaret's former secretary, who had helped her manage financial records for over a decade, suddenly called to say someone had been asking repeatedly about the estate. A week later, Wallace, our family accountant, texted me privately. Someone tried to request statements from her investment portfolio. I'd decline, but be careful. The tension began to thicken like lead in the air. My father, Carl, formerly a corporate legal advisor for a construction firm, was never one to give up easily when control was at stake. My mother, Linda, she never accepted that I had surpassed Tyler, even in her imagination. And Tyler, the guy who burned through $70,000 in scholarship money in just 8 months, wasn't about to walk away from a fortune without a fight. By Saturday afternoon, I was driving back to our old neighborhood. The same 3-bedroom wooden house where I grew up now looked gray and hollow, like the people inside. Tyler had parked his new Jeep in the driveway. Clearly, money wasn't an issue for him, at least not when he didn't have to earn it. As I stepped inside, my mother was already waiting in the kitchen, wearing a burgundy dress and dark red lipstick, not to welcome, but to perform. My father sat at the dining table, poker-faced, swirling bourbon in a glass. Tyler lounged on the sofa, legs up on the coffee table like he owned the place. "You're late," my mother said, voice tight as piano wire. "I'm on time," I replied, still standing. My father cleared his throat. "Samantha, this isn't an easy conversation, but it needs to happen." I folded my arms. "I'm listening." My mother pulled out a chair, sitting directly across from me. "The family is in crisis. Tyler's facing serious problems. Some of your investment accounts could help us get through this." I looked her in the eye. "What kind of crisis? And what does that have to do with the assets Margaret left to me?" Tyler sneered. "That was Grandma's. It's a family inheritance. She just put your name on it because she thought you'd manage it better, not to hoard it for yourself." I kept my voice steady. "So, your plan is what? I hand it all over so you can blow it gambling again?" My dad interjected, trying to sound calm. "No one's saying you should hand it all over. We're proposing a family trust. Pool the assets, I'd manage it, distribute fairly. You'd still get your share, of course. But what matters is the collective good." I gave a small laugh. "Sounds familiar? Like when you sold Grandpa's car without telling me?" Silence fell. My mother's hands tightened around each other on the table. "Let's not bring up old wounds. We needed the cash back then, to send Tyler to rehab." "Voluntary rehab, 3 weeks long with spa treatments and a hot tub," I interrupted. "And who paid that bill?" "I did." Tyler slammed his hand on the table. "You always throw that stuff in our faces. You think you're so superior. Without Mom and Dad, you'd be nothing." "Wrong. I am who I am because of Margaret, not because of you." I pulled my phone from my purse and opened a file. Want to hear her words again? The part where she explains why she left everything to me? I also have the video from the night she updated her will. My father stood up abruptly, his face red. "You trying to threaten us with that? We're family!" Family doesn't secretly file legal requests to transfer ownership of someone else's estate. I tossed a thick packet onto the table, photocopies of emails, letters, and draft lawsuits, all signed by my dad. My mother froze. Tyler turned pale. I grabbed my bag. "I've warned you. This inheritance wasn't meant to be looted. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm protecting what the woman I loved most spent her whole life building. If any of you push further, don't bother calling this a family anymore." And I walked out, leaving behind a silence so sharp, you didn't need to slam the door to hear exactly what was shattering. Grief. I hadn't planned to go as far as rummaging through my parents' house, but after that family meeting, my instincts screamed like a fire alarm. Something was off. Not just their tone or my father's calculating glances. It was the way they spoke. Too smooth. Too rehearsed, like the script had already been written. like I was the final pawn to be removed. 3 days later, I met with George, a former colleague who used to be a legal analyst at a real estate firm my father once worked with. I asked just one question. Is my father trying to restructure any assets under my name? George hesitated at first, but after I mentioned a few project names, he nodded. I can't give you internal documents, he said, but I know he's been working with a private law office in Round Rock on a new family trust. It felt like something cold and heavy poured down my spine. The next morning, I took a chance and went to my parents' office, claiming I needed to find my original birth certificate, something they'd held onto for years. My father's office hadn't changed since I was a teenager. Walnut desk, file cabinets with mechanical combo locks, dusty old bookshelves, and the smell of printer ink mixed with worn leather. I knew the drawer layout by heart. I used to be punished by being forced to reorganize them in middle school. In the drawer, labeled FP, I found a black folder handwritten with Brookshire Consolidated Trust, Internal Draft, Confidential. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it. I opened the folder, hands shaking uncontrollably. Inside were notarized copies of assets registered under my name, Margaret's house on Lake Travis, a list of shares in the investment portfolio, and even a photo of the family jewelry appraisal. But what nearly made me sick was the internal allocation plan. Priority 1, resolve Tyler's critical debts. I kept reading. Under the section titled Plan to Handle Dispute with Samantha, there were 3 bullet points. Emotional persuasion, leverage the concept of family obligation. Invoke moral duty based on the deceased's presumed wishes. If all else fails, file a petition challenging Margaret's mental competence at time of will drafting. Basis light sedatives documented in 2021 medical file. I stood frozen. They were going to paint Margaret, a sharp, lucid woman until her final days, as mentally incompetent just to dismantle her final wishes. Quietly, I took photos of everything with my phone. Then, I carefully restored everything to its place and left the house before my mother got home from yoga. On the way back, I called my private attorney, Annette Davis, an estate and trust protection specialist. Her voice dropped when I finished telling her everything. "This is more serious than I thought," she said. "Samantha, they're not just after the assets, they're laying legal groundwork." "What should I do first?" I asked. "Lock everything down. Immediately, transfer it all into an irrevocable trust under your sole control. And, if necessary, go public. Family or not, this is inheritance abuse." 3 days later, I signed the documents establishing the Eleanor Margaret Trust named after my grandmother. Every asset, the house, the investment portfolio, the jewelry, even her personal keepsakes, was legally transferred into the trust. Sole trustee, me. Irrevocable, indivisible, untouchable by anyone, blood or not. That night, I got a message from my mother. "Samantha, what have you done? We were just trying to help Tyler. You could have shared a little. It's family. Don't take things so far." They stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "I'm not the one who took it too far. You and Dad did. I just finally learned how to swim." That night, I slept deeply. But in my dream, I saw Margaret standing on the porch, wind off Lake Travis tossing her silver hair. She didn't say a word, just nodded once, then turned and walked inside, as if finally she could rest. Annette Davis wasn't the kind of attorney you'd see on highway billboards or late-night TV ads. She worked quietly but precisely, like a surgical scalpel. No wasted motion, no emotional interference. As soon as I sent her the photos I'd taken from my father's office, she said just 3 words. "We start now." We had exactly 4 days before the second family meeting. One I suspected was nothing more than a trap. This time, it wouldn't be theater. My parents would walk into that room with a legal ambush fully loaded, ready to force my signature the moment they saw an opening. Annette moved like she'd been preparing for this her whole life. She requested the original estate documents from Raymond, Margaret's attorney, to cross-reference every clause. She contacted two of the largest asset management firms in Austin, an independent valuation team in Vermont, and a digital security company specializing in asset access encryption. All I had to do was sign, sign, and sign. By Wednesday, we completed the formation of the Eleanor Margaret Legacy Trust, an irrevocable trust where I was the grantor, beneficiary, and sole trustee. The nearly $2 million in investments were split across three independent accounts under the trust name, with third-party oversight. And the Lake Travis house was reclassified as a personal cultural asset in tax filings, marked with a condition, cannot be sold or mortgaged in any form for the next 25 years. The jewelry collection, 47 pieces, some dating back to 1893, was deposited in a private bank vault in downtown Austin, registered with a unique code only I possessed. Friday afternoon, Annette and I met with Raymond at his office. A worn oak round table, sunlight slanting through a dusted window pane. He looked over the neatly clipped file in front of him and gave a slow nod. You've done what few have the courage to do, Samantha. Not just protect assets, but defend legacy and dignity. I stayed silent. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I was being brave or just building a fortress because I didn't trust anyone anymore. Do you think they'll pivot? I asked Nanette quietly. There's no legal angle left. They can scream, guilt trip, or play the victim in the media, but legally, they're locked out. She glanced at me, reading the worry rising beneath my calm. As long as you stay steady, tomorrow. I nodded, but I knew logic was never their last move. Saturday morning, I arrived at my parents' house on time. I didn't bring much, just a simple leather bag with the original trust contract and an updated asset statement. The house was quieter than usual, as if it too were holding its breath for the quake ahead. Tyler opened the door. He looked me over like he was recalibrating my character. Come in, he muttered, turning his back. The living room had been tidied unnaturally. My mother wore a dark gray suit. My father sat ready with a file in front of him, joined by a man I didn't recognize, clearly their new attorney. He didn't offer a name, just a curt nod. We won't waste time, my father began. You already know what we want. I sat, opened my bag, and said nothing. We've prepared a new asset management structure, he continued, merging Margaret's inheritance into a unified family system. You'll have partial control, of course, but oversight will remain with us, the senior heads of family. My mother nodded. This is fair. Tyler deserves a chance to rebuild. We need unity. I slid the file to the center of the table. Too late. My father frowned. Margaret's assets have been fully transferred to the Eleanor Margaret Legacy Trust, irrevocable. No one but me has authority. Their lawyer grabbed the folder, flipping pages quickly. I saw his brow furrow. His lips tightened. This is will manipulation, my mother hissed. No, I said calmly. This was executed exactly per Margaret's instructions, witnessed, notarized, and legally binding. Tyler slammed the table. You think you're some kind of princess? Mom's gone. You don't get to keep it all. I looked directly at my brother. I'm not keeping it all. I'm keeping it intact, the way she wanted. Their lawyer finally spoke, voice low. No loopholes. They've locked every door. My father stood, fists clenched. It isn't over. I stood too. I know, but I'm done. The air in the living room was so thick, I could feel every heartbeat of the people sitting there. What game are you playing? He snapped, jumping up and pointing straight at me. You turning this house into some cheap soap opera? I didn't answer. I just looked straight at my parents, the same people who had used the word family to manipulate me over and over. Now they sat there, faces pale, fists clenched. But I knew that look. They weren't heartbroken, they were furious, because they had lost control. You've broken every principle this family was built on, my mother said, her voice trembling but cold. Since when do you think you're above everyone else? Since the day I realized I don't owe my life to covering up the mistakes this family refuses to admit, I replied, eyes steady. I'm not a walking wallet. Samantha, my father growled, you're insulting the very people who raised you. Everything you have is because of Margaret, I cut in. You're the ones who blocked me from attending college out of state, who told me finance isn't for girls. You're the ones who ignored my accomplishments, but cashed every check I sent as if it was your right. Tyler snatched the file from their lawyer, waving it in my face. You're a damn snake. That inheritance was for the family. You were just holding it. No. I pulled out a copy of the will and placed it on the table. She left it to me. Explicitly. With no clause about sharing. Because she knew if she split it, it'd all end up in a casino or your next 3-minute coffee shop startup. Don't act like you're clean, Tyler screamed, leaping to his feet. When you made it big, did you share? Did you think about us? Or were you just polishing your perfect daughter act so she'd love you more? I held my ground. She loved me because I didn't lie, because I didn't run from responsibility, because I didn't borrow and expect others to bail me out. And what about me? His voice cracked, eyes bloodshot. If you don't help, they'll come after me. They'll destroy me. Is that what you want? I rose slowly. I don't want that. But I also won't stand by and watch her legacy burn just because our parents were too weak to say 2 words. That's enough. My mother walked toward me, her eyes pleading, no longer angry, just a twisted mix of fear, guilt, and control woven into every breath. He's your brother. He made mistakes, yes, but he's still family. You can't punish all of us for a few bad choices. I gently pulled her hand from my arm. No one's being punished. I'm just done being complicit. Their lawyer had gone silent, flipping through the documents. After a long pause, he shook his head and turned to my father. Miss Samantha's legal team secured everything under an irreversible trust. There are no errors in execution. I don't recommend pursuing litigation. It would be expensive and almost certainly a losing battle. My father looked at him, then at me. His eyes no longer angry. They were filled with bitter disappointment, like a man defeated by his own chess piece. You're just like your mother, he whispered, teeth clenched. Selfish to the core. No, I said. The difference is I won't sacrifice myself to protect something that's already rotten. My mother clasped her hands together. Samantha, we're a family. Don't turn this into a wound that can't be healed. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. I'm not the one who cut. You did. I walked out of that house, leaving behind a family not grieving the loss of a daughter, but a puppet, one they could no longer control. The morning after the family meeting, I got a strange phone call while sitting on the porch of my lake house on Lake Travis, a cup of coffee still untouched in my hand. The number showed a Galveston area code, a place I had never even been to. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Is this Samantha? A deep, slightly raspy male voice asked. This is Thomas, your father's younger brother. I shot up straight. Uncle Thomas, a name my family had avoided for over 2 decades. I vaguely remembered a tall man with a kind smile who rarely showed up at Thanksgiving or Christmas. My mom used to say he didn't fit in with the family. My dad always dodged the topic, and now he was calling me? I know you have every reason not to trust me, he said, calmly, not trying to sound overly familiar. But I think it's time you knew the whole truth. Can you meet me? Today? Blue Magnolia Cafe on 6th Street. The cafe was tucked between 2 worn-out buildings, with soft yellow lighting and Polaroid pictures all over the walls. I walked in and recognized him instantly, still the same build, but older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, but the eyes. They were the same ones I'd seen as a child, lost in the middle of fake family gatherings. But you look more like Margaret than I ever expected, he said, with a soft smile. I'm sorry I couldn't make it to the funeral. I nodded. No time for pleasantries. You said there's something I need to know. He nodded and placed a thin folder on the table. Your family went bankrupt 4 years ago. They have nothing left. Everything you've seen, the cars, the house, the clothes, the vacations, has been funded by debt, credit cards, and advance mortgage draws. My face flushed. Are you sure? I'm sure, Uncle Thomas said, pushing the file toward me. I've got copies of the mortgage documents, bank statements, and credit reports from someone I trust in the industry. Even the house you grew up in. It's been refinanced twice. The last time was to cover an $80,000 debt Tyler racked up. I flipped through the folder, the numbers blurred together. Balances below minimums, credit card debts in the hundreds of thousands, and the worst of all, a loan from a non-traditional lender charging triple the federal interest limit. I looked at him. Who did they borrow from? He looked straight into my eyes. I got of Brentwell. I nearly dropped my coffee. Brentwell wasn't unfamiliar to anyone who worked in finance in Texas. It wasn't a bank. It was a group, a front for loan sharks, debt collectors, and in some cases, forced asset seizures when borrowers couldn't pay up. When did Tyler get involved? I asked, my throat tight. When he opened that lounge downtown Austin. Your parents believed in his business plan and pulled out their entire retirement savings to invest? When the bar started losing money, Tyler panicked, took out high-interest loans to cover payroll and keep the place running, then borrowed again to pay off the first loans. It spiraled from there. I sat in silence. Margaret knew some of it, he continued. But she didn't tell you everything. She didn't want to worry you. Still, she knew that if she passed away without taking action, everything she left behind would be dragged down with them. It all made sense now. The pieces I had tried to put together, little red flags, gut feelings, finally clicked. My parents weren't just greedy, they were desperate. So their goal wasn't just to save Tyler, I muttered, was to save themselves. Uncle Thomas nodded. They need you to agree to move the assets into their name so they can remortgage or sell to pay off the others. If you don't, Brentwell won't sit back quietly. Don't be surprised if you start getting followed or pressured indirectly. I stared at him, trying to suppress the fear rising in me. You say this like you've seen it happen. He looked away, eyes darkening. I lost almost everything once because I believed family comes first. But family doesn't mean sinking with someone else's mistakes. I clenched my fists. I won't let them steal what Margaret tried to protect. He gave a faint smile. Then you'll need to stay a step ahead. Not just legally, you need to prepare for what they'll do when Plan A fails. I nodded, every nerve in my body fully awake. The second meeting was held right at my lake house on Lake Travis on a drizzly Sunday afternoon. This time, I was the one who sent the invitations. No longer was it a script they wrote to manipulate me. This time, I was the one writing the script, and the rules were mine. I arranged a long walnut table in the middle of the living room, the brass pendant light casting a soft reflection off the polished surface. To my right sat Annette, my lawyer, calm and precise like a Swiss watch. To my left was Uncle Thomas, quiet but steady, like the last pillar in this family I could still trust. My parents arrived together, striding into the house as if they hadn't been shut down in the previous meeting. My mother wore a long beige wool coat, her face bare, seemingly to send a message that she no longer cared about appearances. My father wore new glasses, holding a leather briefcase, probably still clinging to hope for a deal. Tyler came last, hoodie up, dark circles under his eyes, carrying the air of someone just waiting for comfort. I didn't start with threats, I started with honesty. I invited you here today not to argue. I haven't changed my decision about Grandma Margaret's estate. Everything remains in the Eleanor Margaret Legacy Trust and will stay protected. My mother closed her eyes and sighed. Then what's the point of this meeting? Because I have a proposal, I said, placing a set of documents on the table. I won't use Grandma's inheritance to pay off anyone's debts, but I'm willing to offer financial help from my own savings with clear terms and strict limits. My father frowned. What terms? I looked at Tyler. You will check into a proper gambling rehab center for a minimum of 90 days. I've already booked a spot at the Ellison Recovery Center starting next Tuesday. If you drop out early, the support ends immediately. Tyler's eyes widened. Who do you think you are, forcing me into rehab? I didn't flinch. It's not rehab, it's a high-end treatment center. If you still want someone to save you, then you better show you're willing to save yourself first. I turned to my parents. As for you, I'll offer a one-time financial package to help you restructure your debts. But in return, you'll agree to sell the current house, use the proceeds to pay off high-interest loans, and attend financial counseling sessions with an independent advisor I choose. You want us to live like poor people? My mother snapped, voice filled with indignation. No, I want you to live like adults who take responsibility for their actions. No one said anything for a moment. I pulled out another document. Here's the breakdown of my support. The total I'm willing to offer is $75,000 from my personal savings, not the trust. My father opened his mouth to protest, but Annette stepped in, voice steady. If you agree to the conditions, we'll sign a notarized support agreement. If any terms are violated, Samantha has the right to terminate all assistance without legal obligation. The room tightened with tension. I looked back at Tyler, his eyes no longer defiant, but laced with something close to desperation. I tried to handle it on my own, he mumbled, but everything just spiraled. I don't even know how it got this bad. I know, I said gently, because you've never been held accountable. But this time is different. Uncle Thomas finally spoke. If any of you want to change, this is your chance. If not, then let Samantha live her life. Stop pulling her into this pit. My mother looked up, her once sharp eyes now dulled. You really won't forgive us? I looked at her for a long time. I'm not here to forgive or punish, I said. I'm the only one left thinking clearly in this family, and if I don't set boundaries now, we'll all lose everything. In the end, they agreed. No tears, no reconciliatory hugs, just signatures on paper. But to me, that was the only thing that held weight after years of being manipulated with empty promises. I saw them out in silence. As the door clicked shut, Uncle Thomas gently touched my shoulder. You did it. I smiled, not out of victory, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for living by my values. 6 months after the final meeting, the lake house on Lake Travis had taken on a completely different atmosphere, not from paint or furniture, but from the air inside. It was quieter, more peaceful. I called it the stillness of healing. Not an ending, but a much-needed pause after a long, bruising journey. Each morning, I started my day walking along the porch, coffee in hand, listening to the water gently lapping against the rocks. The maple trees behind the house had sprouted new leaves, signaling a new cycle. This house, Grandma Margaret's legacy, was now more than a place to live. It was where memories, values, and the boundaries I fought for were protected. Work was still busy, but I no longer chased 60-hour weeks. I had learned how to say no to insincere invitations, unnecessary meetings, and most importantly, the need to earn approval. Tyler, surprisingly, was still in recovery. The treatment center sent regular updates. They said he attended therapy sessions consistently, avoided denial, and didn't dodge responsibility. After 3 months in residential care, he transitioned to outpatient treatment and now worked as a peer coach in a rehabilitation class. I hadn't seen him since the agreement was signed, but last week I received a handwritten postcard. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just trying not to be the kind of person who needs it anymore. My parents had also changed, though more slowly than I'd hoped. They sold the old house and moved into a smaller apartment near Walnut Creek Park. My father, Carl, worked part-time at a small law firm handling basic cases. My mother had joined a community financial counseling group, something she once called a job for failures. We didn't call every week, but we weren't in a Cold War either. We exchanged cards during holidays, checked in politely about health, and sometimes I received photos of them taking walks together. Every time I saw those, I thought sometimes change doesn't have to be dramatic, just quiet, but real. One May afternoon, I cleaned out the west storage room of the house, the one where Grandma Margaret kept old papers, antique books, and family keepsakes. Among the yellowed letters, I found a small tin box with a faded silver sticker on the lid. Samantha, open when you're ready. Inside was an old turquoise necklace, a photo of me with her from 2005, and a cream-colored envelope with delicate cursive. For Samantha, if you choose to walk alone. I sat down, hands trembling slightly as I opened the letter. My dearest Samantha, if you're reading this, it means you've made a decision not everyone has the courage to make, to protect yourself from those you once loved most. This letter isn't to tell you whether you were right or wrong. It's to remind you of something the women in our family have learned the hard way, that kindness should never come with unconditional sacrifice. Family is not a place to lose yourself. Family, when true, helps you become the best version of yourself, not someone's shadow, not someone's wallet. If, at some point, you feel lonely on this path, remember, loneliness is better than being surrounded by people who only take without appreciation. Don't sacrifice yourself to keep peace with those who don't value you. Love always. Grandma Margaret. I folded the letter, tears falling, not heavy, but healing. Every word peeled back layers I had tried to bury. She had known all along, and she had prepared me, not with money, but with the deepest understanding that boundaries are the only shield when love turns into a burden. That evening, I placed the letter in a glass frame, hung it by the fireplace. Below it, in small gold lettering, love does not mean surrender. And I knew the journey I was on, though imperfect and scarred, was the greatest thank you I could give to the woman who taught me that some legacies aren't written into wills, but into the way we hold ourselves together. Samantha's story is a powerful reminder that kindness should never be mistaken for submission. In real life, many sacrifice their well-being, finances, and inner peace in the name of family. But sometimes, true love means knowing when to say enough and having the courage to set boundaries, even if others call it selfish. Protecting a legacy isn't just about preserving wealth, it's about preserving yourself and refusing to let anyone, no matter their blood ties, define the worth of your life. What do you think of Samantha's decision? Would you be brave enough to draw the line like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about family and self-worth.